Alrighty, so we did a couple demonstrations in our Docker presentation, so I figured I would go ahead and do them in an online separate recorded session because usually we cut to wrap when we finish the actual, the actual presentation, and we cut right before the hands-on, but I think the hands-on drives the point home pretty well for this presentation, so I figured I'd document it. In the actual presentation, there are three demonstrations provided. One is the NSA Codebreakers Challenge, another is the Circuit Go application, deploying that, and another one is, okay, what I'm staring at right now, the Docker Remote API. So this is cafix.competitivecyber.club. It's what we've been using as a challenge server for a while. Yeah, those are the binary problems. That's the Docker Remote API listening. So we can pull up, I have payloads written out already because after reading through documentation of the remote API, but it's important to note what I'm using and what I'm using to deploy on the Docker server is Alpine SSHD. It's this particular image. The reason I was looking for this particular image is if you go to the Docker Hub documentation, the Docker Hub, not even documentation, the Docker Hub site, and punch in the Docker image, it gives you all the information, and the important bit is that it has a root password. All the other ones require you pump in a key or something. So that's where we're at now. Where did my thing go? There you go. Okay. So without further ado, the first command we're going to do is we're going to pull down that image to cafix.competitivecyber.club. Call image use by calling images create. You'll notice it's doing a progress bar type deal. Kind of makes sense given the CLI does a similar thing when it pulls down. It's pulling down different chunks and pretty quickly pulled it down. Alpine is a really lightweight OS. It's meant to be a lightweight image, so it pulls down pretty quickly. This is a coincidence, but great. So I'm going to change this payload a little bit because we are using port 1001 to 1000. And let me step through this command a little bit. So it's saying create a container using this image with port 22 in the virtual machine binding to port 1001 on the host, making port 22 in the virtual machine the port 1001 on the host. If I go to port 1001 on the host, it will take me to port 22 in the virtual machine. This will bind I think it's called a volume, bind a directory. It will bind the host's root. This could be temp, colon, meaning to the virtual machines folder called working. These both could pretty much be anything, but in this case it's this. There are some OSs that let you restrict it. I think Mac by default lets you restrict what you can mount, but yeah. Restart policy means if the server reboots, then the container will come back up, assuming Docker comes back up. This is an unnecessary parameter. And without further ado, let's create our container. The idea is we're trying to create a container to get an entry point onto the host, cafix.competitivecyber.club. Also, the parameter live video is just the name of the container. It's where it can be referenced as. So, looks like we've created our container. This is all metadata. It wouldn't show up if you didn't do the -v switch. But the important bit here is the ID, and there's no warning, so it looks like it was successfully created. In the recent API, you then have to actually specify using your container ID for the actual endpoint itself. What we're really trying to do here is create a container on the host that makes itself a entry point into the host while still being a Docker container, because that's really what it is. But we need to have host impact. We can't just have a VM impact because there's no fun in that in the real world. If you get in a VM inside the host, nobody really cares. It's just called being jailed. So we do containers. The container ID that was provided to us from the last call was direct response. and then start, and that'll start our container up. No content, so as far as we know, it went fine. We're going to SSH to port 1001 as set and host port. Again, you would go through a bunch of documentation for this to find these specific calls, but the documentation is pretty thorough and pretty palatable. So port 1001, root password is root. You notice the container ID in a shortened format. We're in the VM. It says welcome to Alpine, yet another indicator that we're in the VM. And we remember, is clear working here? Yes. Well, fake works. We remember we mounted the root FS of the host to working. And without further ado, we have the host's root file system within the virtual machine. And cat the flag. We can even add our name to the flag if we really want to. So I'm going to reset it so my name's not just randomly in the flag. And that's how we solve the remote API hack. We could install whatever we want through this onto the host file system, and then especially on reboot, we do whatever we want. Pretty sure we could chroot do it, but I don't think we could through this specific OS, Alpine. It'd probably be easier from Ubuntu to Ubuntu. So that was also a bad example. That's not how you invoke the command anyway. Bottom line is we effectively have root on the system through the working directory. So you'll see even in root, those are the problems from last meeting. And yeah. So next, let's go over the Circuit Go application. Now, this can be downloaded through go.gmu or git.gmu.edu Circuit Go. And for what it's worth, I have SSH access. Not only do I have SSH access and I'm an active contributor, not to Go, but in general, with Circuit, but I also have admin over this server because I'm their sysadmin. So if you don't have git pull access or git clone access to this thing, first of all, let me know. I could maybe give it to you. I don't know if they want me to just arbitrarily hand it out, though. Or you can just download zip and unzip it. We have it here. And to spin it up, well, let me get my console over here. Give it a little descriptive name. Spin it up, all we need to do is run docker compose up. What it's going to do is read that YAML file right here and go over each individual detail. dHaines3 is the main project contributor. The CIS is currently down. It's a test instance Circuit uses, but you could probably change it to Mason's Prud CIS. They just don't like it if when you do that and then you like run 1,000 tests against their CIS server. CIS is used for authentication. Runs a development instance of the thing, the Go site. Go is URL shortener if you're not hip to that. We use it in our club quite a bit. And what it's doing is it's spinning up a development instance for doing dev work on Go. Now, you'll notice in Docker PS, it's already starting up 2 containers, one of which is Go Web, which is the actual web server, one of which is MySQL because Go uses a database. So it's creating 2 distinct containers for 2 distinct server roles, which makes it easier to swap them out. And like, say you need to do development changes on the web server, you can pull down the web server and pull it back up without destroying the database in the process. Not to say you can't live edit things in the Docker container, you can, but it makes it easier to tear down certain elements and tear them back up. You'll notice we're already up. Took not a lot of time. And we can go to localhost 8080, 8000, sorry. And we have a development copy of Go. We can do whatever we want with it, even though the buttons low-key do not work. It doesn't seem immediately obvious why they do not work, but it is because it is redirecting 302 to the CIS server, which is currently down. So there's not much to see here, but that's an example. That's a so-so example of um, how A, Circuit does their development at times, and B, spinning up a thing in Docker Compose. Now, what was our third example? NSA Codebreakers Challenge. I'm not going to go over that actually because it has pretty explicit instructions in the challenge itself. But you're going to sign up. You're going to go to challenge. Challenge. Oh, I'm already there. I'm stupid. Yeah, task 0 setup instructions. I'm going to give you each individual step down to like literally the VM to set up. I'm not going to do a walkthrough of this because I don't know how that constitutes cheating. Like, it's a live challenge until the beginning of December, but so posting a video of how to do it is probably a little messy since I would imagine they consider setup part of the competition. So this is where we'll cut it. Thank you very much. See y'all later.